Welcome to the AIX Podcast. This is a series of podcasts that build on each other to help business leaders, especially C-suite executives, think about implementing AI transformation that delivers measurable results. Today, we're exploring the people side of enterprise AI, and we'd like to provide our audience with two tangible takeaways. How should business leaders prepare their organizations for AI? And how should you manage your career? Our next guest is one of the most human and resourceful leaders I've met, embodying true innovation and people strategy with exceptional intuition for talent needs and a refreshingly authentic approach. She has transformed how organizations connect with their most valuable asset, their people. Susan, or Sue Marks, is a serial entrepreneur. She has built, grown, and served on the board of and invested in over a dozen HR and HR tech companies. Most recently, Sue founded Cielo, growing it into a leading global RPO partner serving enterprise clients around the world. She has since transitioned out of the CEO role and sits on the board. Cielo has over 3,000 employees spanning 108 countries. Sue was inducted into the Staffing 100 Hall of Fame for multiple years, was recognized as Ernst & Young's Entrepreneur of the Year, three-time winner of Working Woman 500 Awards, Marquette University Alumni Award for Entrepreneurship recipient, and annual participant in YPO's executive education at Harvard Business School. Sue is an active board member and angel investor, currently serving on boards at Salary.com, Woots, Nano, Shine, Fusion, and Cielo. Sue also holds leadership positions in some of the most prestigious professional organizations, such as YPO and the CEO Organization, a wonderful group that I've had the pleasure of addressing on AI. Sue Marks, welcome to the AIX Podcast.
Thanks, Ariel. Good to be with you.
Great. So the first question I usually give to our guests is an icebreaker, and it pertains in some form to their bio. So here's yours. So which of these roles from your LinkedIn profile will AI perform astonishingly well at? Serial entrepreneur, CEO, board member, investor, Broadway producer, or insomniac workaholic?
Well, AI is going to, and it has already helped me to be an even more dramatic insomniac workaholic. But AI will make all of us, me included, better at all of those roles that we play. And I would add, it's going to make me a better travel planner, better at managing my own health, all of those things. And, you know, when I think about people that are scared about where it could take us, and we all have a little bit of that, getting comfortable with using it in personal and professional settings and using it daily is a way to, I think, mitigate the fear and come to understand how powerful a help it can be.
I really like how you framed that as AI will help me ... Whereas
Yes.
my question was framed as what will AI do? And I like your take that it won't do very much without us, which is a hopeful message.
Exactly.
So in terms of our first core question, we want to always talk about readiness at the enterprise level for various changes that are coming. AI has come pretty fast to the business world and us personally. I wanted to talk a little bit about AI readiness, especially at the leadership levels. The first sort of thing that we hear is, all boardrooms are buzzing with, we need to do AI. How do we get beyond that to the strategic implementation in terms of what boards and executives should be thinking about beyond the basic cost cutting, or hype that they're dealing with?
I think raising that question, how do we use AI? That statement, assertion, we need to do AI, raising that a level to how can AI and all of the tools that are now available to us and will become available, how can we use that to be more competitive in the market, to improve our sales and marketing efforts, to improve the data that we're able to provide our executives, all the way down to our line workers to do their jobs better. So how can we use AI to execute better on all of our strategies? And that takes a deep knowledge and an enterprise-wide effort that is led from the C-suite in terms of the vision, but then executed all throughout the organization.
It seems like a lot of these things get siloed into different departments. Usually it's a technology thing, so this should live inside of IT, or it's going to impact our people, so this should be a chief HR officer's role to sort of mitigate the risks of change management and organizational change. Do you see a challenge in terms of chief HR officers not really knowing where to start in this new AI mandate?
Everybody is a little bit confused as to where to start because there's so many places we can start. And headlines every day come in through our email and on our apps telling us of another CEO that's saying, before you open a job requisition, you need to prove we can't use AI to do this, right? And I think that boards and CEOs have fully embraced this cost-cutting people replacement potential of AI. I just think it's much more nuanced than that. And the chief HR exec is actually ideally placed to help each of his or her colleagues in the C-suite and throughout the organization think about AI pilots that can be run, especially in legacy organizations, right? Large enterprises, that can be early wins, that can give people comfort and confidence about how we can work with AI to be better, whatever we are, right? So I think the chief HR exec is placed perfectly to help the organization think that through, to set plans and then help execute on those plans. Because if you ask your AI or if you talk to many pundits and say, well, what's going to be the biggest thing about AI? And many people will say it's going to be that the human side becomes even more important. And I don't mean that in a touchy-feely way, or I guess maybe I do, because the soft stuff is often the hard stuff, right? The change management. So that soft stuff is really hard. But we can't confuse the ability to do something. We have a tool that can do this with organization adoption or with adoption on the part of our customers, right? So we have a whole ecosystem to consider as we think about our AI strategies, our AI pilots and proof points, and then AI execution.
The technology industry is not making things easy with, from everything from naming ChatGPT 4 little lowercase o mini is not a particularly great word, among others. I've been on this journey since 2013 when they were called chatbots. There's kind of a fundamental confusion. Everyone wants to talk about agentic AI. I'm well over 10,000 hours into this adventure. And I'm still learning every day, every week, what an agent actually is. I'd flip it over to you. What is your definition of what an agent is?
At least when people think about chatbots, they're thinking about how we can take routine tasks and deliver answers, information, etc., to our customers or our employees, and how we can do that 24/7 better, faster, with more accuracy. So from that perspective, it's an easy thing to deploy and can give us that confidence and start to mitigate a little bit of the fear we have of using technology. So when I think of an agent, maybe one way to describe it, and now don't roll your eyes because you're more of an AI expert than I am, but it's maybe multiple agents, multiple chatbots working in concert, right? And a chatbot that can ask another chatbot to go do research and bring back research and then act on it. So it's actually, instead of doing one thing, answer these questions about our human resources policies, it is doing 3 or 4 things to answer other more deeper questions in a more fulsome fashion. It can think, if you have kind of a big definition of that. I was working on a problem for one of the companies I'm on the board of, and I was using deep research.
Right.
And in about 25 minutes, I got literally 25 pages of research on a very technical topic. Now I have to send that to my scientist to make sure what's right, what's not, and what does it mean. But just the power of that research starts to give you a feel for what an agent could actually do in terms of delivering to an employee or a customer.
And I really liked how you described that, because again, the technologists are terrible at naming things, where there's a whole, in terms of when agents collaborate with each other. And I absolutely agree that it's going to be agentic collaboration, as well as on the back end, the models being aware of what knowledge they can share. And we actually have two emergent protocols that are kind of battling it out. I think at some level I think there's going to be a synergy. So there's, Google has recently released agent to agent, or A2A, which is exactly what you're talking about. And then there's a model context protocol that's out there, or MCP, where I actually think they'll work in harmony. I think the agents will have model context protocol aware backends, but they will coordinate with one another. I actually think it's kind of funny that we have to tell an AI agent when we want it to be in think mode or research mode. Can you imagine how awkward that conversation would be if a human came into your office and said, look, listen, Sue, I've got this question for you, but I want you to be in deep research mode when you give me this answer.
Well, I don't know, Ariel. Maybe that's not a bad thing. Maybe it would help us to be better delegators if we thought about it that way. And I know that one of the consistent pieces of feedback back employees will give regarding their managers is they dump, they don't delegate. But if we gave a little more context around, and take a look at, maybe 8 to 10 different sources this time, I'd like you to spend a little more time on this and tell me how soon you can get to this. And, I think that could be a good thing.
You just mentioned one of the key D's, which is delegate. And, meetings are oftentimes a good framework I've always thought about is, what D's are we doing? Is this a decide, do, download? Sometimes it's a defer or delegate, which D are we hitting? Yeah. This idea of prompting people the way that we prompt AI is a really interesting symbiotic relationship that we have with technology. And, we've had some of these paradigms before. Even our smartphones have this, infinite scroll, and we're now consuming our content and in some ways living our lives as an infinite scroll of experiences. So our second topic, really, this is a good dovetail in talking about how to think about organizational evolution in the AI era. Prompting people really makes me think about this sort of cutover when we compare enterprises to born before AI versus born with AI. And, this impacts everything from how will organizational charts look in the same AI transformed companies. What are your thoughts about how we think about the before and after of looking at this?
If you think about Amazon and Walmart and just think back 30 years, Amazon has taken one path, Walmart has taken another path, and they've kind of met, right? Walmart went e-commerce, Amazon has gone brick and mortar stores, and they still play in different spaces, I think, in the minds of consumers. But I think that's an example of a legacy company, Walmart, and then an upstart at the time, Amazon. When you think about the legacy companies, they've got this huge advantage in terms of data. And that's what's important about data. But I remember one of your speeches that you gave to CEO. You said, what is it? The road to rock and roll is through the blues or whatever, because our data as legacy organizations is such a mess. So we kind of have to fix the data first. But that is an advantage that incumbents have over AI first or born with AI companies have. On the other hand, they can build the most modern interfaces, the fastest upload, download, they've got advantages, I think, in terms of, user friendliness. Yep. And they don't have old habits to change, old employee habits and old customer habits. And we should not ever never think about a clear vision and confuse it with a short time horizon because adoption takes a long time.
It takes much longer than you think. I mean, the road to rock and roll goes through the blues,
yes,
right? And
yes.
we spend a good bit of our days here at Paragon helping companies just shovel data. And the good news is that's getting much easier, number one. Number two is we don't need to build you the perfect data lake or the perfect data warehouse and take years doing it. We just need to unlock that data that can lead to insights, and those insights that can lead to meaningful decisions, and those decisions that can lead to meaningful actions, and those actions that could lead to meaningful results and ROI. There's certain inflection points where something is happening in the macro environment, and there's a change that everyone's dealing with. And it's funny how you mentioned Walmart and Amazon as, almost as two trains that are coming to the same station from different origination points. We saw a lot of this in the pandemic. We helped a ton of organizations, retailers, traditional brick and mortar retailers that had some e-commerce. They started to lean heavily on their digital capabilities, especially around BOPIS, which is the buy online and pick up in store. Some did it astonishingly well. And so I think that your point is well taken, and especially now that we have another one of these waves upon us. It's kind of a wave in a wave. There's stuff going on in the geopolitical realm, taking the politics out of it. We're starting to ask ourselves fundamental questions about where things should be made and distributed, and, should things be made at the edge or closest to where people consume them? And those are the exact questions that we're having with data. So it's kind of like the world of bits and the world of atoms are also kind of coming to the same train station, which is just a fascinating time to be alive and to be an operator. Relatedly, I wonder if AI requires some sort of fundamental organizational restructuring. And if so, are there certain types of enterprises or organizations that will have more success with AI adoption as they think about that type of restructuring?
I'm old enough to remember the first computers, right? And the first spreadsheet and word processing documents that replaced, typewriters and calculators. And there was a lot of fear around, Excel and, what was it? Lotus 1, 2, 3, right? So now I'm really aging myself, and maybe some of your younger viewers are rolling their eyes.
I use Lotus. Listen, I built Lotus databases for knowledge, Lotus Notes. I'm up there.
We worried that they were going to take away the jobs from typists and from data clerks. We didn't put them on the organization chart, but my guess is even back then we thought about how will this impact the size of the departments that we need, the kinds of equipment, capital expenditures we're going to need in the next 5 years in those departments. So I think as we think about AI and the tools that they'll be, it's how can we change jobs, which are really tasks bundled into a box called a job. How will AI change what the jobs look like? And let's think about the org chart, almost maybe pencil AI in to certain departments, but 5 years from now, it will disappear because those jobs will have changed.
A job is a collection of tasks that are bundled into a box. And I never thought of it that way. And that also helps elucidate what an agent is, right?
Yes.
An agent is a job, which is a collection of tasks that are, the only difference is that it's a job that's now being aware of other jobs, which is also one of the key things in HR. If you can, I always call it the catcher's mitt, where one of the great aspects of teams that I like to help build and inculcate is always be waiting with a catcher's mitt for the other person, and, sort of anticipate what they might be needing in order to be successful, check in with them.
Yes.
It's going to be funny to see programmers code those sort of loops of empathy and checking in with people and making sure that you're the catcher's mitt.
Well, there is some interesting research I just read about chatbots being more empathetic than humans. But, I guess they don't have bad days, probably, or wake up hungover and going, So
The secret lives of chatbots. We don't know what they do when we're sleeping, right?
sounds like a series, a new Netflix series.
Yeah. But in a practical note, maybe while we sleep they can do some of our toil, right? I mean,
Yeah.
work has dignity, tasks have dignity, toil
Yes.
maybe not so much. Right.
Yeah.
It's going to be really, really interesting to see how this thing plays out. The third topic I wanted to talk about is something that you introduced when we spoke, and I thought it was a really good framework for thinking about HR and people transformation with AI. And it was the three key pillars. And I wanted to turn it over to you, and if you can give us a mini lesson on what those three pillars are and how they can be useful for executives thinking about transformation.
Well, when I chat with C-suite executives, including the chief HR exec, and most of the pieces that I read coalesce around three areas of HR and business execution, successful business execution. And those three areas or pillars would be learning and development, talent acquisition, including internal mobility. And you can see how that ties back to learning and development, right? And then deployment and redeployment. And that's designing the work, designing the process, making sure that our employees know that as things change so quickly, quicker than ever before in our lifetimes, that they may not have a career ladder straight up, but they will have a career lattice with us. And we will help them train and retrain and give them self-study materials so that they can find a home in our organization for a long time. I think back to Reid Hoffman's concept of tours of duty. And talent, just because we have AI, actually talent becomes more important. And, there's well documented studies by McKinsey and others around the value of 10x talent. And, AI is going to allow us to have more 10x talent, frankly, and turn a 10x talent into a 20 or 30x talent, right? And there's been studies about this. But attracting talent and retaining talent to your organization is still, at the end of the day, going to be your sustainable competitive advantage, because everything comes from the minds of people.
It's a fascinating framework to think through this. And I like the idea of using business principles and extending them into AI versus thinking this is a whole new world with a new set of physics. In this world, gravity goes backwards, and it really doesn't, right? So it comes down to business fundamentals. How do you see these three pillars interconnect to create a comprehensive HR organization wide AI strategy? And are there examples that you see of real world organizations that are doing this particularly well?
All organizations have enterprise IT systems to manage operations, supply chain, finance, HR. And those tools now, those systems have so many new tools to help managers be better managers and be better communicators, help the organization at large be a better communicator, and provide more touch points for employees with each other, with people in other departments, and with their managers. And those tools, and I know you're very familiar with this with a couple of your clients, those tools to allow them to help self-manage. Right? So how do we tie these apps, let's just call them, that we have, at our phone, which is with us 24/7? How do we look at our productivity? How do we look at the positive impact we've made on our customers today or this week? I need to have a crucial conversation with one of my direct reports, and I've got a couple of questions about that. There's tools now that can just help me think that through, tying that learning and development, talent acquisition, and mobility with deployment and redeployment. That's all a virtuous circle, a virtuous cycle of being a great place to deploy your skills. I was going to say great place to work. I mean, and we still call it work, right? Great place to work. But when you think of vibe workers now and all of the other ways that we engage talent, I want to be able to attract the best talent to do their best work on behalf of my organization and its customers. And that means I want to be a great company that cares about the people that are voluntarily giving their time and effort and creativity and innovation to me.
The fourth topic I really wanted to explore related to that is sort of reimagining the career path. And you had mentioned that careers are now more lattices as opposed to ladders. It always bothered me that analogy of a ladder, that you had to climb something and usually you have to climb over somebody in order to get to some place at the top. Yeah. It's a much more collaborative way to think about it. But you talk about hiring A talent. Are there certain skills that we now have to consider in the toolbox for what comprises an A player or a 10X player that we wouldn't have had to have thought of before? Is it that somebody that raises everyone's game with knowledge sharing, or is it some other special superpower that we'd be looking for in A talent these days?
Part of me loves that, and the other part of me knows not everybody can be A talent. So what does that make them? B, C, D, F? No. I mean, every person has dignity. And I think that's a real important ethos, at least for the organizations that I'm involved in. But I think that to be great at what you do is to have technical capability in your subject matter, your area of subject matter expertise. And that's critically important. But things are changing so quickly that constantly scanning the environment in your area of expertise is really critical to be staying abreast of how things are changing. So that's the IQ side of it. Then the EQ side of it is, how do we be a good leader, right? How do I make everybody on my team and everybody around me better? How do I help them think through things? How do I help them be more successful? Those human skills will absolutely become more important as AI gets deployed more and more. And then recently, if you think about what else, it's my attitudes towards work. Is that the AQ? Maybe is there a third, leg of this stool that is a lifelong learner? That is the way to keep our careers successful and keep ourselves employed, whether at our company and our current company and our industry, or moving on to another industry and another company, and to help our organizations pivot as markets change and competitors change. Right. So I think that's the three-legged stool that I'd recommend people think through as they think about their own careers, continuing to be a valuable colleague, employee, or associate at their organization.
In terms of organization, I feel like there's going to be a higher dependence on the private sector because that's where the jobs are. Things appear to be moving so fast that one doesn't have the luxury to spend years and years at a higher educational institution. Much as I love them, I've taught part-time at UCLA. Yesterday I judged a hackathon at SC over Zoom, which was fun. But we're seeing more of this private sector stepping up and saying, you know what, not only do we produce goods and deliver services, but we're also responsible for keeping our people sharp. In terms of education. We see things like the Palantir, I think they're calling it the fellowship. Are you going to get your data science degree from Uber? Are you going to get your autonomous driving degree from Waymo? What does that look like, in terms of as it impacts cross-industry mobility? Does education, do the skills that you pick up on the job doing innovative things in these transformative businesses and old businesses that are transforming and modernizing, does that turn into some kind of cross-industry mobility?
Skills assessment and just understanding what your skills are, what skills you need, how to get those skills is over the last 5 years has taken on increasing prominence as things change so quickly. Having this experience in this job, which is that box of things that we do and skills that we need to do those things, becomes constantly changing. Understanding those skills is absolutely key. And as an individual, it's important that each one of us understand what our skills are and where we need to brush up and where we need new skills. And organizationally, although we have these enterprise systems of everybody that ever worked for us, in addition to our current employees, we still don't do a good job of understanding and keeping up to date and then matching to new opportunities within our organization, those skills, those people with those skills. So, again, I'll go back to it's the road to rock and roll goes through the blues. Still lots of work to do there.
Skills tracking and management, I feel like, I don't know if anyone's doing it exceptionally well. I think the options are your HRIS system or your performance management process inside of an organization. Then there are the self-reported skills that can be voted up or down by your peers on LinkedIn.
Exactly.
Is there a third sort of modality that's emerging that is more, I guess, more magical and back end? We have one CTO that works within Paragon who has a side startup where he's building a sort of AI-based tool for figuring out what people are good at for lateral mobility. Specifically, his pilot was in Japan because they hire for life, and it's very important that they take care of their people. Are you seeing kind of like a third modality of figuring out what people are good at skills wise?
I think there's more and more emphasis on being responsible and accountable for our own lifelong learning, whether it's skills training, professional development, skills development. And it doesn't matter if we're so-called white collar or blue collar, because everything is changing. So I think the new tools, even if something as old as LinkedIn, where you actually had to think about what your skills were and put them in a summary and, do some check boxes and things. I mean, that at least started an awareness of this. And now there's all sorts of AI-based tools for sourcing candidates to fit our organization, or vice versa. For candidates, it goes out and it will search jobs that look like a skill fit within other demographic parameters like geography, et cetera, et cetera. So with AI, it's going both ways. It's a little bit like the Common App for college, where you could fill out one application and then send it to 20 different schools. Same thing is happening now in the employment arena, in the talent arena. So keeping up with all of this, it's a constant challenge and opportunity at the same time.
Here's an interesting classification problem. If you are responsible for reinforcement learning or training a humanoid robot on a factory line because you've done the job for a number of years, what color is your collar? Is it blue? Is it white? Is it light blue? Is it periwinkle? Like, what do those distinctions make sense anymore? Or are we just kind of converging into this?
Yeah, that's such a good visual. I think we're converging. Yeah. And a robot doesn't have to look like a humanoid robot, right? They come in many different forms.
It could be the giant Amazon arm. Those things are frightening.
Yeah, I think everything starts to come together. We will have a deeper interface with technology than before, and it started probably with I'm just going to go back to typewriters, right, and telephones. But that was an interface with technology, and look where we are today. But we're about to have even deeper interfaces as we think about, electric vehicles are computers, right? We have a computer in our hand, we drive a computer. So our interface with machines is going to become deeper and more complex. And now I'm starting to sound like science fiction.
It's a perfect transition to what I wanted to talk about next, which is the dark side, or the the challenges to the human side of AI automation. Is there a dark side of AI companies, for example, charging based on headcount reduction? We have a number of partnerships. Always try to stay abreast of the latest tools. We're seeing a trend. It's innovative. It's also alarming at some level, where tools are now charging based on headcount that can be reduced. It brings up questions of redeployment versus cutting the quote unquote lower performers. What is, in your opinion, the dark side of this, and what are the guardrails that we should be thinking as we consider the people aspects of AI automation?
The obvious one is reputational, corporate reputation and public relations. And I won't even go into some of the legal issues. But I do think new pricing models are emerging. And I've read a number of articles about the death of, SaaS fees. Now, I'm not sure that really will happen, but we may see some combination of monthly recurring revenue and then pay by the drink. And yes, I have seen in some of the AI sales forces that replacement cost. And I think it's naive to go in thinking that you've got to do a much more robust analysis of the opportunity there for cost reduction and revenue enhancement, right? It's not just about we can have 5 AI salespeople and so we can reduce 5 people. You better be darn sure that your customers and potential customers are going to react well to that, and that you don't actually see them underperforming. You would have just laid off your 5 or 50 person sales department. So I think if something's too good to be true, if something seems too easy, you've got to rethink it. But right, we should always say at least those two things. These tools will make better salespeople better. The potential customer interface with our sales representatives better. And maybe average salespeople will become better. The way to do this is not to simply impose this from on high, but to take a more thoughtful approach, which is why, again, I urge the chief HR exec to really understand how AI will impact every single department in their organization and help navigate those transitions in a way that is really positive and maintains their employer brand, maintains their brand position, and enhances their corporate reputation.
These tech cycles, we're told that humans will be disintermediated, and the sales point is a good one. Last month we had the Channel Partners Conference that we attended. A lot of those people have known each other and have been doing business with each other in this channel for decades. And I spoke to, one of our partners, and she said, Ariel, when I first started my career, they were telling me that this is all going away. And here we are, right? And people are still shaking hands. There's a very human aspect to this thing. There's that, but I think in a co-pilot setting, we're helping a lot of our clients sort of, use the magic of AI and machine learning to give the salespeople the 20 prospects or customers that they should call on that'll have the highest probability of increasing customer lifetime value, for example, right?
Exactly.
So it's more of a co-pilot thing than a replacement concern.
Yes.
That brings up the question of, like, in terms of real world impact, just because you can have a superpower in doing something, should you? So for example, will designers now want to code? Well, is that something they could do it? They could use a co-pilot, but maybe a designer just wants to design. Are there things that we should be thinking about, taking into account individual interests, balancing them with manager interests, employee and professional interests? Like, where's the Goldilocks point in all this?
There probably always will be a place in many areas of expertise for craftspeople. When I think about, we mentioned A players to low performers. To me, the low performers are the ones that refuse to have an open mind to new ways of doing things and new technologies, and in whatever their role is. And so if I think about designers, I mean, I've seen this huge range of 20 to 80+% of coding is now done with the help of AI. So that would be a software designer. If I think about Hollywood and movies and Netflix, I think about Dune, the Dune movies, Dune 1 and Dune 2, and Wicked. And just scrolling through the credits, there's people doing LiDAR, right? So yes, there will be a place for craftspeople, just like there probably still are a few of those old Disney animators that are still doing those plastic films, right? But there are many more that are going to be using these new tools in gaming, in entertainment, and real-world simulations. So I think it gets back to your point of every new technology brings new jobs, more jobs. They are different, and we need to retrain. And I would recommend everybody take that as a personal responsibility instead of waiting. You just don't want to wait for someone to do that, because then you're behind.
And how do we think about measuring those things? You know, we talked a lot about performance and high performance and low performance. Are there metrics that are going to be created, destroyed, modified by this technology? Certainly we think about CSRs and call centers and those types of metrics. But are there ways to think about this on across industries?
Well, I mean, you've got revenue per employee, or, some financial metric per employee, shareholder value per employee. And those have been done for a long time. I've seen studies done by Harvard or Penn about good governance practices. Those organizations with this checklist of good governance practices had better financial metrics. Same thing for HR, more or less strategic HR functions as measured by these things, better shareholder value. So I think those will still be there. Those longitudinal values are not always easy to get to, which is why we default to, weekly, monthly, quarterly, annual metrics, and metrics like sales per employee. One would also think a more robust scorecard around product innovation, industry awards, new markets entered, old markets left. I think that there's a much more complex, balanced scorecard if we're to truly think about how to measure the people-AI collaboration that we're going to be seeing.
So the next topic I wanted to get into, Sue, is this idea of AI as a partner, not a replacement. And, we are seeing people's attitudes in a state of limbo. Should we be positive or negative when discussing AI as your manager? Or should we be thinking about more of using AI and a partner for self-management? How should we be thinking about that transition, Sue?
A complicated topic is that there's 4 or 5 generations in the workforce now. And the youngest generation is really comfortable with doing everything on an app in this, this app human interface. And those that are older are much less comfortable. And, some might even say skeptical or suspicious of these kinds of things. Complicated when you have a large workforce of many different generations. So I would say that most people, and Pew Research would bear this out, would say, we like the idea of AI helping us, right? Of being able to ask a question and get some answers. And we've gotten used to chatbots and things, and we understand that's kind of like AI, right? I'm talking to the older generation. So we're kind of comfortable from that. But do we want AI to be our manager? Not sure we want to be managed by an AI. We understand that AI is going to help source candidates and maybe, prioritize resumes and things. But do we want AI to be doing all of our hiring, be our hiring manager? We're not sure we like that either. So it's really finding what you call that Goldilocks lane of enough AI, but not too much AI. And I'd probably think about my audience and my user base, and I'd err on the side of pushing a little bit where there's lots of experience, and I'd err on the side of being a little more conservative and offering some human assist where there's less experience and exposure.
Some of these consumer products have gotten us really comfortable merging our world of atoms and the world of bits.
Yes.
So, for example, I religiously track my, at least 10,000 steps a day and my move goals on my health app. Can we imagine something like that that's sort of like passively sitting in the background, not too creepy a way, but maybe something that's like helping us get to those streaks or goals?
When we've talked, and I've strongly advocated for taking responsibility for personal and professional development and lifelong learning and those kinds of things, that kind of an app, I think, would be really helpful to most individuals in terms of how am I tracking towards these most important goals in my work? How am I tracking towards this most important goal in terms of what I want my career to look like or my professional life to look like 5 years from now? So yes, I think we will become more and more comfortable with and then reliant on those kinds of tools.
Taking the paradigm further, just like I can share my health data with my primary care physician or some sort of healthcare portal on the back end, perhaps I can share data from those types of apps as they emerge with my current and future employers. Employer is such a strange word. Nowadays, I think about everybody on teams that I lead as the most talented, independent contractor, even if they're an employee or, that we're lucky to work with for as long as they want to work with us and we want to work with them. It's sort of this mutually symbiotic relationship. So exactly. I wonder if that as automation has us doing more things maybe, or giving us a better choice of what we do in terms of purposeful work and dignified work as opposed to toil. If those types of apps and tools that we can imagine in the future would help. And we always think about getting hired. A lot of times we don't really think about wanting to be hired and wanting to work on my lattice or whatever. Maybe there's some flippening in there where the individual's career path and the enterprise's need for talent sort of converge and level each other up.
Well, it's a proactivity around where am I today and where do I want to be tomorrow.
And, in terms of the different types of co-pilots that we're seeing, might we see things like frontline manager enablement, like, for example, AI tips for managing your team? Do you think that there'll be sort of like an incremental approach to this adoption versus a big bang implementation?
Absolutely. My guess would be that we're seeing the early adopters. We're beyond the innovators moving into the early adopters of these frontline employee apps now in terms of scheduling and self-scheduling for shifts. For example, restaurants, healthcare, retail, etc. And then just company policies, safety tips, and managerial tips and coworker tips. So I think people, especially those that are used to using apps and are very comfortable using apps, value the ability to talk to a virtual coach, for example, about a meeting they need to have with their manager or about a customer situation that occurred yesterday that I'd like to learn how to handle better today. So I think those kinds of light coaching applications are already being adopted in the early stages.
Perhaps also the hiring process may change the performance review process into more of a, let's get myself rehired for this job, or let's find a lateral job in the organization that I want to be rehired or laterally hired into. Do you think in doing so that might create a level playing field between these AI agents that are doing the bundle of tasks, as you said, that comprise a job, and humans that might want to do those bundles of tasks or certain bundles of tasks. What do you think happens to the annual review? It's such an awkward process.
I don't think anybody likes that annual review process.
What's the hip term for it these days?
I think it's annual performance review. Or maybe there's some descriptor that we can't put on this podcast. Right. I think it becomes more real time. Right? If we have something akin to a device on our wrist that's applauding us when we do certain things on a daily or weekly basis, the gamification of work. And I know there were people who would roll their eyes about the word gamification back, a decade ago, maybe even 5 years ago. Now I think people understand it works and that we as humans really value it. So I think that those can be powerful tools in making ongoing performance adjustments so that we can do a better job for ourselves and for our colleagues and for our organization and for our customers.
Gamification gets a bad rap, but literally the hackathon that I was judging yesterday on Zoom was around building games and introducing gamified products for the purposes of energy efficiency, for example. And it occurred to me that one of the cool things about games is that it makes a problem more approachable. Mm-hmm. It gets you past the first two steps of starting something or living in this solution space as opposed to the problem space. And gosh, isn't that what AI agents do sometimes? Like, hey, I'm trying to brainstorm this meeting or I'm trying to brainstorm this document. Just starting on it, just those first two steps are so hard, but maybe I can have this, like you said, a coaching conversation with the AI to sort of get things sparked. And then I can, in physics, momentum is easy once it's already there.
I know you know the history, but if any of our listeners go back and think about the game, when in chess, and I can't remember which number was the move that had never been done by a human before. I mean, sometimes we say in a meeting, like, there's no dumb questions, there's no dumb ideas, right? Let's just talk about everything. Well, the AI literally every once in a while comes up with something that only a person that didn't have all of this legacy of experience that changes the game. And, I think we will begin to see that happen a little bit more often. It's not a regular occurrence, obviously, but we'll begin to see that happen more in our lifetime.
It reminds me of gamification. I was lucky in a former life to have very helpful investors who their claim to fame had been they were the creators of the game Candy Crush, that whole studio.
Yeah.
They did fantastically well. And they actually flew us to Sweden to teach us everything they knew about gamified systems, which was incredible. Talk about an educational experience. And one of the things they taught us in terms of Swedish values, in terms of culture in an enterprise, is that when someone comes to you in earnest with an idea, they implement it, or they find some place on the roadmap to implement that idea, as opposed to arguing about it or making them feel bad or talking them down. And I thought that was so refreshing. And it occurs to me now, with the assistive AI agents, it'll get so much easier to just implement everybody's idea, get the data back. Hopefully it's good data that won't put us back into the blues, but it will keep us keep us rocking, Maybe the AI makes the change in the organization and simulates it while we're sleeping. Maybe those are the secret lives of AIs. It is going to be a fun and fascinating future. And as a wrap-up question, I wanted to ask you that, Sue, as someone who's been on the forefront of talent innovation for decades, what is one counterintuitive prediction about the relationship between humans and AI in the enterprise that most leaders aren't probably considering on their radar today, but will be totally obvious, say, 5 years from now?
I was at an AI session up in Canada about 18 months ago. And one of the women that was presenting said something like, at some point in the future, I don't know if it's 5 years from now or 10 years from now or however many years from now, we will wonder why we ever let humans drive cars, because the autonomous vehicles are so much safer. And so I think that's the kind of question you're asking here. And as I thought about it, one of the obvious answers is, everything's going to become more human-centric because there's going to be so much technology. But I think I think there's something like a human AI hybrid roles. And if you think about digital twins, and I've heard them called mind mirrors. I mean, we see it in Succession, that Apple TV show that was like the most watched TV show on Apple ever, right? Where you have your work, your innie and your outie, your work self and your personal self. You saw it if you're a sci-fi aficionado, Fringe, which was 15 years ago or so. There was an alternative universe, and then there's another show about different alternative universes. So this is something that's been a little bit sci-fi, but we are talking about, and there are companies that are doing digital twinning to think about product market fit. And if I think about on my LinkedIn profile, if I have 5,000 people following me and, you have 10,000 people following you, right? Maybe you have an AI Ariel and I have an AI Sue, and that twin, kind of looks at our networks and makes recommendations, right? So I think there is something about these digital twins that 5 years from now, we will be using them and we'll go, oh my God, I can't believe, how did we ever do without them, right? So I think it's something like that, the human AI hybrid interface.
Fascinating. I think certainly my digital twin, I hope, would be way more extroverted than, that would go to every party and stay until the very end, until the very last drink was poured. One of the things that I always say is that we are a collection of apps or personas that are living on fleshy hardware. For that reason, I had a real problem when people would talk about canceling a person in their whole, or disregarding an entire person versus like, there's one persona of Sue that's professional that I really agree with. And, oh, by the way, there's this other persona that I disagree with. And it's okay for me to disagree with one persona or the other. In recording this podcast, I have to turn off all the apps on my phone. And so right. what you're really saying is that we are an amalgamation of these apps and co-pilots, that help us express ourselves. Maybe the hope in this is it'll give us more of a portfolio and more of a freedom to fail fast. And, tying this back into your entrepreneurial background, maybe this helps all of us become more entrepreneurial.
Organizations, especially large organizations, need more entrepreneurial spirit in them in order to navigate quickly enough. Speed's becoming a huge asset, right? The ability to move quickly. They need that entrepreneurial kind of gumption and spirit more than ever.
Absolutely. Well, this has been an absolute treat and an honor.
It's been great. Thank you.
And thank you for joining us, Sue. And I look forward to meeting you on many, many happy occasions.
See you at the next conference.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.